Right, welcome back. This is going to be a long update because progress has moved along very swiftly because the cockpit and the driver area was holding all the construction up. But now that's done, you can see I've done a lot of work. So I'm going to stagger this update into a couple of parts, saves moaning for about 7 or 8 minutes. So I've done the cockpit, mounted that underneath, feet first, as per the plans. I put a bit of glue on that top edge and then mounted that onto the bottom edge of that front wall, which is that there. I put the decal on first though, before I did all this. Let that dry, microset, microsole, and then I mounted the cockpit into place, let that dry. Then once the cockpit mounted into place, I then mounted this complete assembly onto the floor itself, this like oval egg shape. You've got a pinhole there, which is, there's a pin just here, and then you've got that cutout section there, and there's a rectangular section mounting tab on the back of there. So I put a bit of sponge on there, got me clamp from underneath. I put a clamp here where I painted on that, and I put a clamp on there, let that dry, and that's glued lovely. Then I glued these venting on the sides here, both sides. I thought it was going to surround the engine, but it doesn't. Going back to the plans, there's a mounting little peg there, and that goes onto this little raised section here, and you glue that into place both sides. Once that was done, I then put these little electrical components on one by one, painted them on the sprue, then glued them on. You've got that electrical component there, and then you've got a couple there, one there, one there. Once that was done and dry, I then mounted the engine, turning that back round. Now the engine, into the floor, there's two little quite large mounting pegs that mount into the holes there and there underneath the engine. So I just put the glue round, held that down. I couldn't clamp it because my clamps wouldn't reach over, but to be honest, it was quite a tight fit, so I let gravity take its course. Then I painted these little exhaust parts there. I painted them silver, then mixed some blue with the silver and brushed that on, and they look like burnt, and then just mounted those on and let them dry. So that's the rear section done. Right, now for the front nose section and the suspension arms. So where are those on the plans? There they are. So I push these into the hole of the nose, E1 and E2, just ran a chopper glue in there, and then push those into place. Those clipped into place, I didn't need to glue them. Then you got the nose section, which I'd already put together. I put this like steering arm in. I didn't glue it in because that freely moves. I don't know if I can demonstrate it. Yeah, it does move. So you can see it moving backwards and forwards. So those move. But I made a bit of an error. Because you remember when I said I was waiting for my son for a week to do the decals and he never got around to it? I put the nose and the wing together. And I'll probably, on the plans there you can see. And I decaled everything. I shouldn't have done that. Because once I'd put this into place, it wouldn't meet there. There was a little bit of a gap. Because the suspension arms actually mould themselves round the actual wing section here. And I don't think the camera's going to pick it up. But I had to cut a chunk out just there. Just a little chunk to encompass that arm. So then once I'd done that on both sides, the nose section would actually meet the front. On the plans there, they wouldn't meet properly. So once I cut the chunk out, that met. So don't glue your wing on straight away. So once I've glued all that, I then went on to the first section of the brake hub. Now the brake hub is pretty much the same as the rear hub, but you got them two pins, you got the steering arm which moves, and you got that triangular arm. and there's a mounting peg there. They've got a hook on there and there. That was difficult to line them up and to try and snap them into place. And then once I'd done that, I'd actually got this bottom one and I had to mount that on, and that was dead difficult to get that on. To line them up was a bitch, but once I'm lined them up, I put it on very, very gently, and eventually they just snapped into place. Then I did the brake, which is pretty much rinse and repeat from the rear suspension. Just painted that, put the rubber collar in, and glued that into place. You don't glue the rubber collar in, you just plot it, you just push it into place. And that's the front section done. But like I said, don't put that front wing on until you're ready. Now with the decals, it's just got the Goodyear one, as you can see there. You got like this white section is one long decal. You have to push it underneath the nose, and then microset microsole. There's a little bit that hangs over underneath. The microsole took care of that. Let that dry, sealed it, put the cannons on. I've put the tree and the bull on. I put the tree on first, sealed it, then put the bull on. And that's the front section. Right, again, during that week, I did the decals on the front wing. I'm now about to explain the rear wing. The rear wing, I primed it in the grey primer, sprayed it in the white, all round the wing. The front of the side plates, I painted those in the Revel Blue, which is the 36152, which, you know, it's a fairly close match to the Tamiya spray. So I let that dry. Painted the black on the inside of the wing as per the plans. And then these bottom two wings, painted those in the black. Let all that dry. And then applied the decals, which on these front side plates, you got Labatt's logo, Labatt's lettering, and the number 5. And again, I'm really well chuffed with Hasegawa's decaling printing skills, because these whites are really bold. Because I've had white decals in the past, especially from the lifeboat, and they were crap. They blended in and disappeared into the blue, but these are absolutely fantastic. So I've done both sides of those. Resting the wing up against the brake hub, you got the cannons. So I put these directly onto the white paint. The two halves, you got the top half of the cannon, that went on perfect, even though that arm in the middle was slightly raised, but again the microsole blended it round the actual arm. But on the bottom piece, the arm is very raised indeed, and I couldn't put that on as one, so I had to cut it in half round the N. So I put the C, A and the front part of the N, lined it up right up to the arm, and then the NON, push that right up and line that up to the arm. It's a bit more that way than centralised. I couldn't do anything about that because of that bloody raised arm in the middle. Microset microsole sealed, and it's looking lovely. The bottom wing there, I've put those little tiny cannon decals on, microset microsole seal. Turning the wing round, you got the bottom wing. Now the cannons, again two halves, but these went on perfect because there's no raised section on the underneath. Microset microsole, I haven't sealed those yet. Then you got these little tiny cannon decals, like the ones on the front, just whack them in, microset microsole. And then you got this little line decal which represents the underneath of that arm, so I'll put that on. It kept moving as I was pulling my tweezers away, but I managed to get it to sit in the end. Microset microsole, that's lovely and dry. So that's my rear wing done decaled. Right, last but not least is the engine cowl. Now it's looking lovely and white, but what I had to do is I had to put a couple of venting parts in. So you got that one there, and you got that one there. So I glued those into place as the plans. Now this one, it says it looks like you've got to mount it into the top of this engine cowl. It's just to say that it's opposite to that one. So once I mounted those, let them dry. Any trouble is I had to shave a bit of the bottom off because it was longer than the actual edge of the actual cowl. So I cut that off, sanded it down, and now it's level, as you can see, both sides. Because I know if I put it on as it is, there's going to be a gap. So I've done all that. And then I went on to the actual painting itself with spray paint. It was a grey primer. And then I had the first coat of the white. But some of the edges, especially this round here, was still showing the primer slightly. So I had to do a top up of the second coat. And you can see it's looking really, really nice. Because I've got to mask that off 3 times. I've got to mask it off for the yellow part, for where the camel decal goes. So that's going to be camel yellow. You've got this dark section here with the diagonal line. That's going to be the brilliant blue. And then that section there is going to be the white. But I can't do anything with that until I mount it onto there. So I'm going to do a test fit. Because that diagonal part there is parallel to that. So it's going to give me a nice reference so I can get that done properly. Because that's what it's going to look like when it's all spray painted. So the masking is going to be a bitch. Right, now the one thing I forgot to explain was these little white sections here, these white plates. So I'm going to pause this a sec so I can get the plans right. Right, folding the plans over, you can see that it tells you to put it in flat because you've got all these cutaway edges that's going to surround the suspension arms. So again, put that in flat. Once you've got it in the right position, you need to bring that top edge forward so the bottom edge will go down and it's sitting upright, basically. So before I've done all that, I spray painted it in the white, and then the inner edge is black. Now there's a little mounting square there. I don't know if you can make it out. And there's one underneath around all that suspension. So I just ran the glue and then just pushed it into place in front of that tab. And then I put a bit of sponge there and a bit of sponge there to stop them falling in on themselves. Because once the engine cowling's done, you know, spray painted, but when I do test fit it, that section there is going to be resting on that arm there. And that's all the progress explained.